Hello and welcome. My name is Samuel Ray, also known to many as Dr. Sam. And with me is my usual co-host out there, out the window, Prime.
We're doing a visual gag now. All right, I guess you're not gonna be able to tell if you listen to audio. That's me.
I mean, you still sound like it. And then in this episode, we have, for the first time in season 2 of the podcast proper, we have a guest member. So today we have Arixfees, otherwise known as Sapphire.
Hi guys, thanks for having me.
So Arixfees is someone who I've been, chilling out in her streams for more than a year now, and very chill, enjoyable, family-friendly VTuber. So, and someone who I feel was very fitting for the current topic that we were going to discuss.
Very poignant.
Yes, poignant. That works too. But yes, someone who whose experiences translate well into this topic. And so what we want to discuss today is story in video games, the importance of them, how they translate into the player experience, and how they kind of meld with gameplay to make satisfying game experiences. Because throughout our lives, all three of us here on the show have had very different experiences with games and story in games. And Arixfees, I know you on your streams, you play a lot of RPGs and narrative-heavy games, right?
Yes, I do. I really love a rich story, with a lot of characters that you can relate to and kind of grow with, like, the ones where they start you in school and then they grow up and then you kind of like see them transition from being a naive teenager to being a grown-up and making their own decisions and making their mistakes. I think that's really awesome to take that journey with characters.
Yeah, especially since you started playing RPGs when you were young, right? Yeah, I've
been playing like RPGs since, Zelda days kind of thing.
Yeah, so like having those kind of experiences of the characters being around your age and then maturing and having character development through the story really allowed you to connect with them.
Yeah, and it's also like, I mean, I'm not a teenager now, but like I was a teenager, so I can be like, well, yeah, I could picture myself with that situation. This is what I would have done, but that's really cool that they made that choice. And, seeing the different options that can be taken in a lot of these RPGs, because you can shape your story in a lot of these newer RPGs.
The decision points, right, where you get to make a choice between multiple options.
Yeah,
and that helps with that immersion.
Right, and it impacts the story greatly sometimes.
Yeah, especially the ones where you have multiple endings, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, and then what are some of your favorite story-heavy games that had like a big impact on you growing up?
Honestly, the biggest one was definitely Final Fantasy VII, just because it was one of the first like kind of big RPGs that I played that had oh my god, there's 4 discs. Oh my god, look at the animation, look at the videos. Oh my god, look at this boss. It takes the whole screen. So like those are the kinds of things as like a teenager, you're like, wow, this is amazing. And obviously now if you look at it, it's kind of paling in comparison to what we have now. But like a game like Final Fantasy VII, I think it was also the fact that I kind of played it with my brother. We kind of tag teamed it. I'm more of a puzzler. He's more of a strategist. So he did more of the battle stuff and I did more of the exploration stuff together. Like he played, but I did like a lot of the, this is what we should do kind of thing. So I enjoyed the game for the first time that way. And I got to enjoy the story a lot more by having to do it with someone else.
Okay. Yeah, 7 was the first one with pre-rendered cutscenes, right? To really punctuate certain story beats.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's funny that should be mentioned because I do have a little bit of research here regarding the progression of like cutscenes like that, because that's a big linchpin in the progression of story-based games, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But that's the thing, though. The story was just so good that it really didn't matter, although it still wouldn't have had the impact it did on like the world of RPGs if it didn't have that, because that was just kind of, I'm not going to say innovative, but it was definitely something that made it stand out.
Yeah, it was innovative for the genre at the time.
I think innovative is fair.
Yeah, it was innovative for the genre at the time, and it was the first in the series to have 3D character models as well. So it innovated on several fronts.
Yep, the little blocky characters.
And it was freaking long, like you said, 4 discs.
4 discs.
on the
Was it-
PlayStation
No,
1.
sorry. It was 3 discs. Final Fantasy 9 was 4 discs and 8
Oh.
was 4 discs. Yeah,
Okay.
sorry. My bad.
But it was the first one to be that long in the series.
Exactly.
Yeah.
9 would be like my other like very, very near and dear to me. Just in terms of the fact that it was actual fantasy for me, and like the characters were just, they're very relatable and their stories were very relatable. And I guess because they had a character that had a gemstone name, I felt kind of like connected to her.
Right, Garnet, the female lead, right?
Yeah, exactly. But I like the way they played it out. Instead of it being like the materia system, it was like you actually had classes and they do specific things. Whereas Final Fantasy VII, you kind of had the, you could build your character really however you wanted based on the material you put on them, which is really neat because you can take anyone and build them into something else.
So it seems like a common thread is, while the stories are very important for you, what helped you to really get immersed and engaged in it was that player involvement, that player decision element where you got to shape it. Yeah, player agency. You got to shape the story to an extent.
Yeah, definitely love the player agency. Like in like present days, like games like Fire Emblem, where you get to like shape kind of how the story goes, like who you have your relationships with, and that kind of changes the ending of the story and how your main character ends up. Like that, I love that. I was so engaged in that whole having tea time with the characters that you liked, or building the relationships with them, or battling with them, because that helped build your connection with them, which helped your battling with them. Like if you had a better connection with a character, I think in one of the Fire Emblems games, your combat was better.
Yeah,
you
a lot like in a Persona.
more options. And the same thing happens in Trails of Cold Steel, where like if the more you play with a particular character while you're linked to them, the better your combination skills will be.
Okay.
Yeah, I got so stuck on Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon because I wanted to have a run where nobody died. And I got to a point where I couldn't do that and I stopped playing.
Well, because that was a remake of Mart's first game, so the difficulty on that one, it was pretty much impossible to go without a single casualty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I play games on Super Weenie Hut Junior mode. So, all that people die thing, I don't let that happen.
Permadeath, right?
Yeah, no, permadeath does not happen in my games because I'm just here for the story.
Right. So it does
I just thought that was how I should play it. I just stopped.
Yeah.
Because there was like a hallway with archers who could shoot through the walls. I'm like, no. I'm done.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, and it was before all those mechanics that could really mitigate that, like the pair-up mechanics and stuff, or the flanking maneuvers and stuff.
Yeah.
Simultaneous attacks and junk.
I guess.
Yeah. So it seems too that you really like, it's not so much games where the story is completely linear, like you're basically just playing a movie. Right? You seem to like those stories that are more about player immersion rather than just playing a movie.
But here's the thing though, because like older games were very linear. Like it wasn't really open world. There was really only one way it could go. I mean, you could choose to fight, let's say, optional bosses and stuff like that, but like it didn't really change the outcome of the story per se.
Well, that's what I meant by linear, was like nothing the player did changed what happened in the story in any way.
I mean, that's kind of been a circular sort of thing, because then you get games like what, The Last of Us, which is very story based, but it's linear. Like you can't really change what happens.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And like a lot of those popular recent games that are like AAA have been very linear stories where nothing the player does changes it. And so once you played it once, you really have no reason to play it again because nothing's going to be any different.
Yeah, I haven't played Last of Us either, but I just know of that, as well as like Telltale games have the joking reputation of like, oh, it lets you make all these choices, but effectively most of those choices don't matter.
Yeah. But when you compare it to like a game in the Tales series, I don't know about the older Tales series, but I know from the games that I did play, which was Cold Steel, like multiple decisions. Sorry, Trails, not Tales. Trails of Cold Steel.
I thought you were talking about Tales Up. I was like, yo, I played those.
I've played those too, but I haven't played a Tales game in a very long time, so I can't really compare it. I think the last Tales game I played was Vesperia. So
I remember Symphonia 2.
I actually own the original Symphonia for GameCube.
Same.
I was actually planning on streaming it, but I can't find a place to put it right now because I have too many things going on, too many games to play.
Yeah.
Don't stack consoles.
Huh?
Don't stack consoles. Don't do it.
Don't stack consoles?
Yeah.
Consoles on top of each other.
Oh no, definitely won't do that. I'm not talking. No, I wasn't talking about the space on
She
my
meant
desk.
into her schedule.
Oh.
I meant like in time wise. No,
Okay.
Yeah.
I have
Shows
my
you how my
Wii.
brain
My
works.
Wii is so super tiny. There's space for it for sure.
I'm like, oh,
As you could tell,
physical
Sai was not
space.
thinking like a
Of course
streamer.
That's what you're talking about.
He wasn't thinking like
I
a
mean-
streamer.
Yeah, no, I mean, I would love to stream it because it was like a thing for a while, right? Because they did the reboot, but I'm like, I'm gonna play the OG game for
Yeah,
GameCube because I have it.
Yeah.
I even bought like stuff to do it. I bought like an adapter. So I'm like, people will like this. I
Original
love this
hardware.
game.
Nice.
Also, I have a big crush on Lloyd's voice actor. So
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
He plays Robin in Teen Titans.
I know he hasn't done anything for a long time too.
I know.
Who that
That's
was.
okay. That's
I
okay.
forget his name too, but
Scott Menville.
oh yeah, I'm bad with actor names and voice actor names, but yeah, once you said it, I immediately remembered. Teen Titans
That's
was a
okay.
great show.
It was.
Sidebar there.
Off topic.
Yeah.
That's fine.
So in terms
We
of
own
like
the left field. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
in terms of like RPGs that I like, I think there are good points on linear games, like, you know, the older ones, which you kind of have one direction to go in because you're just going on the journey. You're just enjoying the journey. Whereas sometimes if you have a game where you have multiple options, like again, Trails of Cold Steel, it's kind of stressful because you're like, okay, am I making the right choice here? Am I picking the right character? Am I going to get the best ending I want? Like, there's a lot of stressors when it comes down to it.
That actually reminds me of a video I watched recently. But sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No worries. Go ahead.
Okay. So basically, it was a video I saw recently that talked about bad endings in games, like regarding the stories. And one of them was a game in which there was like optional material where you had to like level up this particular stat. It was a grind. It was an RPG game, a JRPG, and you had to grind out this like this side thing for all your supporting characters, like max out a certain bar basically on all the supporting characters by grinding out this tedious thing. And if you did not 100% it for all supporting characters, then you get the bad ending of the game. And so it's like, if you get 99% of them, too bad. Of one of them, and 100 on all the rest, too bad. You still get the bad ending. And it's like, that's a situation where I think that was a situation where mechanics and story totally did not mesh well, because in that case, you know, if you don't engage with that one system to 100% completion, then you get a worse version of the story. Like, and then the person who made the video felt so cheated, you know, and like it took a game that they otherwise loved and enjoyed the story and just ruined it.
Yeah.
You know, like the gameplay, that aspect of the design just ruined the story for them. And then I want to actually kind of segue that into to let Sai bring out his perspective here, because Sai has had an opposite experience in many ways, not completely, but in many ways to you. So I wanted to get his side of that out there, and then I wanted to kind of marry the two together because I actually have experiences on both sides of the aisle.
Yeah, okay, so I also did have that research I mentioned before, but I guess I'll start with my personal experience. So as a lot of people may know, I am Dr. Sam here's younger brother, so a lot of my experience playing video games growing up was multiplayer. In fact, the first video game I ever played, Sonic 2, like we've mentioned in plenty of episodes before, I was playing as Tails. I started as player 2. We played, multiplayer Soul Calibur 2 before I was good enough to like go through a story. I would play Spider-Man 2 on the GameCube and just have fun swinging around. Like, I didn't do any fights, I didn't do any story. A lot of what I played was based solely on enjoying the gameplay. Also, like Mario Party 4, Super Smash Bros. Brawl. So I didn't really interact with story in video games for many years, and like there were moments when I tried like Kingdom Hearts 1, I got lost in Traverse Town. Kingdom Hearts
the
2
beginning of the
back,
game.
and I couldn't beat Darkseid, the first boss, and I didn't really have any of my own consoles, so the fact that I had to go into like Sam's room to play some of these games. Like I remember one time I tried to get into Final Fantasy 13, and I played it for like an hour one day, and then a week later I came back to it. I was like, I have no memory of this place. I just never played it again.
Yeah,
so,
it wasn't until you got handhelds that you were able to play single player games, pretty much, the DS.
I mean, I guess there was the aforementioned Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon that I dropped off of. But,
yeah. But no, you completed a lot of single player games on the DS, but usually that's because they have
Mega Man Zero and.
But most of them
like
had
that.
a multiplayer component that kind of pushed us forward.
Mega
right?
Man Star Force, yeah, that was one of those. But yeah, I played through all of the stories of Mega Man Star Force. Played a few of the Mega Man Battle Network, and Mega Man Zero. Yeah.
Custom Robo Arena.
Yeah, but
one you did play was The World Ends With You. Didn't you complete that?
On the DS, I believe I did. I think I did. But yeah, so most of the stories I actually played through were on the Nintendo DS.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't play like even Sonic Adventure 2, the story, until I was like a teenager. But like when I was younger than that, we were playing a lot of the battle mode because it was Sonic Adventure 2 Battle on GameCube.
Mm-hmm. So
yeah, the gameplay has always been like the first and foremost thing. Most of the time for games, and like even currently, I don't really play that many single player games, but my most recent experience just going through a story of a game was actually Sonic Frontiers, and that was very enjoyable, sort of coming back to I guess a moment in like kind of getting back to my childhood in a way, while my arm was still healing from a break from an accident. And yeah, it was the best Sonic game in like over a decade, right? Mm-hmm. So there's that nostalgia element.
Yeah, and the story was pretty well written, actually. Ian Flynn did not do a bad job at all, I would say.
Yeah, it was so satisfying.
Yeah, and it hit you at just the right time because you were not able to do a lot of things that you wanted to do, and so then just playing through that game, believe it or not, the story actually had a bigger impact on you because of where you were in life at the time.
Yeah, it's a very simple story. It's not some kind of like masterpiece, but it was very satisfying, and it actually was surprisingly human, especially with Sage. I don't think we're in spoiler time frame anymore. Just
no, the game's so old.
Sage, like that hit me. I don't know why. I just like the character, and like, no, how dare you? Don't kill her on me. Don't do it.
Yeah.
And the after credits, I'm like, Lynn, why have you played with my emotions like this?
So you can kind of relate to Sapphire a little bit in that you have experienced a few stories that kind of hit home for you, but for the most part in your life, it's been gameplay first.
Most of the stories that hit me are when I'm watching something like an anime.
Oh yeah.
But my development in gaming, like for most of the time, it was gameplay. That's it.
So yeah, I find that interesting too, because good gameplay and good story, I do believe that those aren't necessarily mutually exclusive.
A good game, I think, needs to be a marriage of the two.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And that's where I want to come in, because honestly, I've been in both camps. I've had a period of my life, like when I was a teenager, and I was more of a loner type as a teen. I hadn't found my, social strengths at the time yet, really. I had a few close friends, and then that was it. And That's when I found Tales of Symphonia, and I was so hooked on that game from beginning to end. Like it was literally the
It was
only game
unique,
I
right?
played. Yeah, and the story was what dragged me in. What pulled me in. It was the story and the character
Yep.
writing, and then all the little interactions with like the Z skits and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. The voice acting was really good too.
Yeah,
That
and
really added to it.
it just drew me in, and I was hooked all the way until I completed the game. And it was like pretty much the only game I was playing, aside from the times that I was playing it with with Sai here. I just legit was only playing Tales of Symphonia on my own time.
Which
And
once again, while I enjoyed the character interactions,
Mhm.
I was coming in mainly to to come into the battles and fight.
yeah,
Otherwise, I was sitting there watching him go through the story. Like I experienced some of it, but it wasn't a contiguous thing.
yeah.
I was there sometimes when I was playing it, and other times it wasn't.
If I remember
So
correctly, when I
mainly the story.
completed the story, it was late at night. I was just hooked. And I was playing it, just binging it, but marathoning. But yeah, no, so I've had periods of time where like the stories of games really just hit home and sucked me in. Like Tales of The World Ends With You was another hugely impactful game for me.
Yeah.
Like that one, the story and the characters, it was so bittersweet when I completed the story too. It was such a good experience, such a good one. And like,
Well, I mean, I think you probably related with Neku, right?
yeah, at the time I totally related with Nick. That's probably why it hit so close to home. But it was, I don't, so I've had those moments where the stories of a game just really got me. Like BioShock Infinite, that story was the ending. Some people didn't like the ending of that game, but me having the like loving theoretical science and stuff, that ending just had me thinking for so long and looking up other people's interpretations of it and going down that rabbit hole for like days after I completed it. And so it's like story can really, make a game for me at times. And then at other times, I mean, we grew up in the on the game consoles like the Sega Genesis in the 90s, or at least that's what I grew up on before Sai was even born. And so I like, back then, most of the games, there's very little dialogue, like definitely no spoken dialogue, but very little text dialogue in the games at the time I started playing games with my father and stuff. So the gameplay was what made me come back to them, because we replayed the same games over and over from the beginning because there was no save files at the time. So we replayed Sonic 2 beginning to end countless times. And to the point where we know the game like the back of our hand. Like I still to this day, I can sit down and play it and just blast through it like my childhood was yesterday. It's just, it's crazy. The gameplay is what stuck in my head in all this. Like the mechanics, I just remember them like that, just like flip of a coin. I back into that mode.
A coin.
Yeah, I don't know. Drop of a dime. There you go. That's what I was trying to say. Drop of a dime. Drop of a dime.
I mean, it's different.
Okay, but at the drop of a dime, I'm back into the swing of things, The mechanics are ingrained into my body. So I've experienced both sides of things, and I have had situations though. And here's where I want to get a little bit of discussion going, because I know that you, Sapphire, one of your main games, if not your main game, is Genshin Impact, right?
Yeah.
To the point where you're one of the you're in the creator program with them.
I am, yeah. Yeah, I do do that.
Yeah, so I tried playing Genshin, and I enjoyed it in the early game for a bit, but I never even got to the adventurer rank where you can play co-op. I never even got to that point. Like I'm like at the adventure rank level right before that when I put down the game for good, pretty much. And
that's understandable. It's kind of hard to get through it because I had a hard time. I was frustrated with it too.
Well, for me, it wasn't frustration. Honestly, for me, the reason why was because the game it felt like there wasn't enough there for me to sink my teeth into. It felt a little too bare bones, like particularly the combat. And like, because early on, I enjoyed exploring the world, in that, people tried to liken it to Breath of the Wild, right? When it first was announced and shown. And because of the art style, how they showed off the fields and stuff like that. But I enjoyed exploring that game, all the same. and it was really enjoyable early on. But after enough combat encounters and after having explored the majority of the starting area, there wasn't enough in the gameplay to really draw me in, because the variety seems to be less in the moment-to-moment combat and more in the characters and their synergy with their attacks and the elements and stuff.
Right. Yeah. The physical combat is not
It's very simple.
You're not supposed to hit things. You are supposed to just use your elements to help do the damage. There's a few physical characters, or you have to build your characters to be physical. Otherwise, it is just based on elemental reactions.
Yeah. And so that just didn't suit what I was looking for in terms of like action game combat, or action RPG combat. And so it was a case where, while the story was interesting enough that I wasn't like completely bored with it up to that point, the gameplay actually detracted from the draw of the story for me. And that actually was kind of what inspired me to think of doing this topic in a podcast in the first place, because it was a case where the two didn't mesh right for me, and the gameplay was the deal breaker. And even though the story, and so many people, you included, absolutely love the story of Genshin and the character writing, all the same reasons why I love the Tales of series, right? Growing up. And The World Ends With You. But in Genshin, it just wasn't enough for me, because the difference was the gameplay, because in the Tales of games, it kind of itched that fighting game similarities. Tales of Symphonia had that linear motion battle system, I think is what they called it.
Okay.
And so it felt fighting game-esque a little bit. And so I loved the gameplay in that, the action combat. And then and how like the character skills grew and evolved depending on which ones you use the most.
Okay, so is there like a statement or a supposition here?
Okay, well, and then The World Ends With You, had its most extremely unique gameplay style, like never been imitated since then. So that absolutely helped it draw me in. So I found it interesting. Have you had any cases though where like the opposite happened to you, where you loved the gameplay of a game, but the story just took you out of it?
I probably do. I just can't remember.
Okay.
Like it literally would be like that.
Okay, well then
unmemorable.
Then have you had a situation like mine where...
Actually, now that I think about it, Final Fantasy 8.
Oh, 8?
8 was such a...
Squall, right?
Yeah, Squall. It had a pretty good story. I loved the ending. The ending of 8 is probably one of my favorites. I just hated the gameplay. It was mostly the draw system. It was the most annoying thing to deal with.
Huh.
And I honestly, I liked the story, but I didn't like the character. Like
Okay.
most of the characters were like so boring, and I'm like, it was trying very much to be like a 7, but not 7, but throwing the school aspect into it, and it's just like, you're trying too hard, guys. You're trying too hard to do the sci-fi thing, and it's not working for you.
Yeah, that actually. Sorry, go ahead.
But the whole like pulling it into like Norse mythology thing was pretty cool. It was very interesting. But the gameplay, it was awful. I honestly only really enjoyed playing Laguna because he was a great character and the music was good.
Okay. What were you going to say, Sai?
Yeah,
oh, I just thought like that probably made sense, especially what you said, that it felt like they were trying to do 7, but again, I mean, 7 was a huge smash hit, right? But the common like perception of Cloud is that he's like this sort of bland main character, although I'm guessing that people who actually played 7 would say otherwise, but
definitely say otherwise
because you get to see him grow a bit.
Yeah, but so I didn't experience Squall like directly in Final Fantasy VIII. I never played Final Fantasy VIII or 7, honestly, but we played a lot of Dissidia and Dissidia Duodecim, and at least in that game, Squall does seem kind of bland to me.
Yeah,
like
they
might have been trying to do Cloud again, but make him bland.
And a teenager, so therefore he was an edgy teen instead of an edgy young adult.
Exactly.
So it was worse.
I don't think Cloud is bland. I do think Squall is bland. Like he was so generic, and just Rinoa was such a bad character. And
I do also have issue with people that conflate being a stoic or a man of few words character with being bland, because like that's another thing. Honestly, if I ever get to my
I've heard the
my
way Squall's written was actually
video
like
essays.
like the romance subplot with him and Renoa is like he's doesn't care about her, and then all of a sudden at one moment he just all of a sudden romantically interested in her, and it's like this is not organic at all.
I hate when they try to get you to believe a romance. It's like, no, why are they suddenly in love?
Yeah.
So that was Squall.
She basically like harassed him.
That's even worse.
Oh, God.
That's the way I saw it.
So she pestered him. She was interested in him and just pestered him until eventually he fell in love.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh,
Or not
just
even that.
snap.
He's just like, I'm gonna just do this to shut her up. I'm gonna get canceled for this. How
No.
dare you hate Squall?
I've heard
honestly,
he's
like,
divisive though in the community in general.
yeah,
love or hate
but
him.
He's much better in Kingdom Hearts. His character is a much stronger character.
Mhm.
He's got a better personality. He says things that actually make sense. He's a strong leader in Kingdom Hearts in comparison to the character they portrayed him at in Final Fantasy VIII, where he's supposed to be like the leader of this group of people, essentially.
But he doesn't show that he cares enough.
But he's just so not there. It's like he's literally experiencing the story from the outside. I mean, Cloud, you find out kind of why he starts out the way he is. If you obviously play the story, and then you also play, some of the other stories.
We're aware of some of those plot points.
I know.
Yeah, but because there's like new games coming out, I don't want to spoil it for people who haven't experienced it. So I don't want to say something. But my point is that you kind of find out why Cloud is the way he is.
If you know, you know.
But it doesn't like excuse the way he behaves, and I think that's a big difference in storytelling in some games where people try to excuse really, really garbage behavior.
Yes.
And they're like, well, they went through this, so obviously they're entitled to act this way. No, it does not make it right. Does not make them a better character for it, because they actually haven't grown from it.
And that
they
actually
literally
ruins
shut
stories.
themselves off in the world.
And it ruins stories, right?
It's lazy writing, and that's a turnoff.
Yeah, and you see that a lot in games, especially.
Yeah,
we're not going to go into why,
too much
but especially
where you
recently.
don't call them out for anything.
Yeah. And like this character, characters who can do no wrong, even though they're completely jerks or questionable morality and stuff. Yeah.
That's what I just said.
Okay. Sure. All right, but I get what you're saying there, and I definitely agree with that. And in that kind of case, even if the game has a lot really good gameplay, if the characters are written poorly, right, the story can ruin it.
Yep.
So it goes both ways. If the gameplay just doesn't hit, then it can, even if this game has a good story, it depends on severity, because in your case you didn't enjoy the gameplay of 8 that much, especially when compared to 7, which you had played just before 8 was released. So you had that direct comparison much more fresh in your mind. But it wasn't enough to make you not play through the game to completion.
No, I played through it and beat it because it was the thing, right? Like, I loved the Final Fantasy series and I wanted to experience it.
Yeah. And then in my case, I didn't have that kind of attachment to Genshin because it was a fresh IP. Yeah.
Goodwill got you through 8.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, and also there weren't very many options back then,
Yeah. That does change things too. Yeah.
Right.
Because
Like
back then you had whatever your parents bought you, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Same with us. We made the best of what we had. And so when you bought parents bought you something, you were grateful and you enjoyed it.
I'm going to ask actually if this game counts as a story-based game, because my first game for Nintendo DS was Animal Crossing Wild World.
Oh, God.
I played that game so much. It does have a story. The story is you're trying to pay off your debt, but
I would hardly call that a story, though. It's more chore than a story.
It's more like a business simulator.
I guess so.
Indentured servitude to
It's
Nook.
Loan Shark. That's what it is. It's Loan Shark 2.0.
Yeah. But yeah, you did play that a lot. But I think what got you in that one was the activities being in real time with the real clock of the real calendar, all the activities and events, but also all the characters you got to interact with, right?
Yeah,
they all
it was
had
the
unique
everyday
personalities.
thing. And I figured out the way, because like sometimes a villager would like be packing up inside their house to move away, but there was a way you could talk to them until you got a certain dialogue thing, and they would ask you if they should stay, and you'd say yes, and then not talk to them anymore until the next day, because that would lock in. They would stop moving away. I remember one time I got grounded in my DS for like a week, and then my favorite villager there moved away.
Oh no.
I forgot that happened. You were so upset.
Yeah. Mabel the koala.
Wow. That's funny.
No, Mabel.
No,
Yeah, it was Mabel.
I thought it was.
No,
She was one of the sisters, the Able sisters.
The Mabel
it was
sisters.
okay. I don't remember if it was.
Yeah, because it was Sable and Mabel.
Labels.
Okay. Well, I don't remember her name, but it was a like a gray koala.
Mm-hmm.
She was the first villager that like gave me the gift from the full friendship, which was like a portrait of her.
Oh, I
So
see.
yeah.
Okay, that's funny. Oh, great! The neighbor's dog is out. If you hear any barking, that's what that is.
Yep. That's what I'm hearing.
If we hear you barking,
What's the neighbor's dog?
you said if you hear me barking.
Oh,
You know what you should do? You should insert a dog whenever the dog pops out, as if it's part of the conversation.
JPEG dog.
It's like a PNG dog.
no. I'll consider it.
I think that'd be a funny edit.
But yeah,
JPEG dog.
my goodness.
There it is again.
But yeah, so Sapphire, because I know when around the time that, what was it, some of the Genshin imitators came out, right? And like Tower Fantasy, which despite its name is a sci-fi game.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's completely sci-fi.
Final Fantasy is sci-fi sometimes.
Yeah, fair enough. Actually, Final Fantasy 7 was
though.
kind of steampunk-esque.
I mean,
Sci-fi.
Final Fantasy 1 was full fantasy though, so
Yeah.
Well, 7 and 8 kind of took a different direction with it, but remember, 7 was the one that really saved Square Enix or Squaresoft at the time,
Squaresoft.
because the series was going down. The whole thing was, I don't know, in the toilet, and 7 came out and it kind of changed everything, and it made them their money, which is probably why they tried to replicate it with 8, and that didn't go as well as they thought, which is why they went back to fantasy with 9.
Right.
I don't think that 13 is it 13?
13 is quite sci-fi.
13 and 13, I don't find it quite sci-fi though. I haven't played the whole thing.
The very beginning has them on this crazy train, like super metro rail kind of train.
going off the rails. Sorry.
So and like fighting drones and robots. It was pretty sci-fi.
I don't know. I wasn't a fan of 13, to be honest. Like the series kind of lost me after 10.
Heck, even 15 has.
But I have 12 and I've played it. I just didn't like it.
Yeah, 15's even kind of 15 is even kind of sci-fi-esque because they had like the flying car. They had cars, and the city was more like a modern setting rather than a fantasy setting. So they liked to marry sci-fi and fantasy in a lot of the entries.
From what I heard too, the like 13 with Lightning, the main character, it was another like Squall situation, right? Where she was bland. A lot of people said
Bland and aloof. Yeah, that's true. And actually, they tried to imitate
Cloud, but a woman.
Yep, pretty much. Yeah, so back to Tower Fantasy. We own Left Field, okay? Left Field is partially owned. S-Factor Labs is a majority shareholder in the Left Field, okay?
Good, like several acres in the Left Field.
Yes. So, with Tower of Fantasy, which is sci-fi, I kind of liked it more than Genshin because it was Genshin-like enough, but the combat felt a little more rich to me because there was the perfect dodge mechanic, which slowed time, like in Bayonetta and such. There was, you still had synergy elements with the multiple weapons, which also corresponded to the characters that you could change your appearance to be, appearance and voice lines and all that kind of stuff. And the verticality too, because like you could do pop-up attacks and like aerial combos, like in third-person action games, and there's air dashes and stuff like that. It just felt more full the gameplay did. And
see.
so I enjoyed it more than Genshin, although I honestly haven't played it all that much because there's just so many games to play now that are coming out. But
There's so many clones.
yeah, honestly, if it was on Switch, I probably would have played it more because unfortunately my phone can't run most of these mobile games nowadays that are, you know, pretty good quality, like Genshin and Tower Fantasy and whatnot. So I have no way to play it on my own time pretty much. And if I do sit down at my PC to play something, it's gonna be like Monster Hunter or Warframe or, you know, any of my mainstream games or content games or what have you. There's so many out there.
Yep.
So, you know, it's
You
just
should be able to run Star Rail. Star Rail's not very
okay. So my
it's
phone is garbage. It can't even run. It's not compatible for Star Rail either.
oh wow.
Yeah, it's garbage. I need a better phone. It lags in normal usage. Okay.
Yeah, you definitely need a better phone.
Yeah, I do. I just it's a low priority because it works well enough for the necessities and what I do on the most part, like YouTube and podcasts and music. So I put up with it for the time being. I'll get a new phone later. But yeah, you know, so that's one of the reasons I just haven't been able to play those kind of games much. But I did enjoy the gameplay of Tower Fantasy a lot more and the setting because, you know, I'm a sci-fi fan. I'm a sci-fi head.
I hate it, but it's also because I used a controller and the game was not optimized for controller play.
It had optimization issues in general, but yes, the controller support was not great.
And I couldn't play it with a keyboard and mouse.
That's another reason I didn't play it much. Yeah.
When I found out Honkai had controller, I was like, thank you.
Yeah, Star Rail.
Yeah.
Star Rail also sci-fi?
It's sci-fi. It's a turn-based RPG.
It's a turn-based RPG, but it has a lot more fantasy elements.
Yeah, the Genshin makers, they took
sci-fi fantasy.
I mean, and it makes sense. Obviously, they don't want to make a game to compete with Genshin. They made a different genre of game altogether. It's not an action RPG. It's a turn-based RPG.
Right, and it follows the Honkai style, Honkai Third
Impact
timeline.
Yeah, the Honkai Third Impact sci-fi-esque setting. Right?
Yeah, it does.
Okay, yeah. So, you know, they know what they're doing. They're pretty good at it. And
well, I mean, they took what they learned from Honkai Third and they took what they learned from Genshin and they tried to make a better version of the game. They also took a lot of inspiration from, you know, Trails of Cold Steel, Persona, like all those turn-based RPGs that, you know, you don't really get to see as much. Like there aren't that many turn-based. There's no ATV games anymore, I don't think.
Yeah,
so
that's true.
This is like a nice refresher to, and I can play this on my phone because I cannot play Genshin on my phone. Like the game runs. It's just I can't do combat with my thumbs.
It runs
like
barely. Touchscreen controls.
Yeah, the touchscreen controls. I just don't like the touchscreen controls. Like, why do I have to buy an actual element to be able to play the game? No, I can't do it.
Yeah, you don't want to buy one of those like things you put your phone in to give it controller feel. Gotcha. Yeah, I don't like touchscreens on games other than like card games, but even then I can't. I don't play card games really. So.
I mean, I played like Mega Man X Dive for a while.
Yeah, because they designed it around that.
Touch controls.
Yeah. But that's because they also gave it the lock on, so like you didn't have to worry about jump shooting as much. So the fine controls weren't as needed as in traditional Mega Man type games. So,
but like even like going back to like games with story elements, the Honkai Star Rail story is really good. The Genshin story is really good, but they have different types of gameplay, which makes it kind of either it hooks you or it doesn't. Like a lot of people are like, I want to optimize. I want to be able to do this, and this. So they like build characters using different artifacts and different types of stats to make them strong in different ways or make them synergize in different ways, which is something that, you know, a lot of games don't have. Like you don't have real synergies the way Genshin does it. So that gameplay wise is actually pretty interesting because sometimes I get into my head that way where I'm like, I want to do the most damage. I want to do numbers, you know? and even with Star Rail, you want to do that. You want to optimize your characters, but there's no real synergy.
Especially since it's a turn-based RPG and that's all about the numbers and strategies.
Exactly. And another good thing about like the turn-based is like that interrupt feature, which exists in Trails of Cold Steel. I don't know if it exists in any of the other Trails game, but Honkai has that too, where you can like literally use their burst at any time. and interrupt the boss from attacking. Like you could essentially put them in a stun
Like a
and
stagger.
stop their turn. So those are kind of cool because it can completely change the outcome of a combat.
Yeah, thing is, see, so like I have a passing interest in Star Rail, but here's the problem that I've run into. I can't recall the last time I ever actually played a turn-based RPG to completion. Something about it being turn-based, just even if it's got a great story, I just drop off after about, I would say, 20 hours most of the time.
But Honkai has an autoplay feature, so you could, if you don't actually want to watch the combat and you just want to see the story, you could always just have it autoplay for you.
I mean, that's the thing.
That's a mobile, but that's a mobile game thing. Because it's a
Yeah,
mobile
and I
game,
don't.
they'll do
That's
that.
a mobile game thing I never really liked. It makes me even less desire to play the game because then I'm not even playing the game.
Yeah, just personally, then I would watch an anime.
Yeah,
I don't know.
And I don't even watch anime right now.
It allows me to like put it in autoplay and then do work.
fair enough.
Yeah.
And it's mostly, I usually mostly use it for like the mundane things, like
Mhm.
you know, farming artifacts or farming
Yeah,
the talent
Right,
books and stuff like that. Like that's mundane stuff. You're not going to do a lot of thinking in combat for that. It's not like a big boss fight.
true. Let it do the grinding for you, basically.
Also, the multiplayer, it's not really multiplayer, but you basically borrow someone's character, like the way it is. And they use you use their character in your combat. So if someone has like an OP character and you bring them in, they basically like up your game
Carry.
like crazy. Yeah, hard
Uh-huh.
carry, which is really, really interesting because it allows you to use characters that you don't have. 'Cause you play as
and
them.
get a feel for them or see
get a
which
feel
ones
for
you
them.
want to use the
Yeah,
gotcha
both.
pull on.
Yeah,
see.
exactly. So
Interesting.
so that
Try before you
also-
buy.
Exactly, and I think that's really cool.
That actually
And,
is good design.
Like because I got like a specific character that not a lot of people had at the time. Like I got a lot of people using my characters, and when people use your characters, you get money for it.
Oh,
like
you
they-
get rewarded. You get some.
you get rewarded for it.
Right. What do they call
So-
that? Yeah, you got some. I forget the term for it, but yeah, you got a little reward for it.
So
Okay.
I mean, there's incentive.
Yeah, I get you. Yeah, it's just one of those cases where, like, in the case of, like, even if it's got an amazing story, the gameplay just, it doesn't have that much of a draw for me, not like it used to. But I can't recall ever beating a turn-based RPG to full
So
completion.
You've never beat 7?
No.
Hold on.
Have you?
Consider Pokemon.
Okay, you got a point. That's the only turn-based RPG I actually have beaten.
Pokemon X,
multiple
Y.
I don't consider Pokemon an RPG. not at all.
It's a turn-based RPG.
It's just a
It's
unique
not.
take on it.
It's not an RPG.
The ones that are fighting are monsters, not people.
Hmm. You know, maybe that's a discussion for another episode of, like,
Your sixth
maybe
Pokemon is your party.
maybe that's a discussion for another video
I
where we
have
can
a
discuss
very-
is Pokemon an RPG or not.
I have a very strong opinion on Pokemon these days. So
Maybe we'll make that a
And
YouTube
it's-
video. Yeah.
it's definitely not a pleasant one, and I don't think anyone would like it.
Really? I mean, see, here's the thing.
Well,
I
we
like.
haven't been playing Pokemon recently. We only played
Yeah.
like X, Y, Omega Ruby, Alpha Sapphire, Sun, Moon.
Yeah, those are the last ones we played with Sun and Moon. Yeah. So we're kind of also like we lost a lot of interest in the recent stuff. But you know what? Honestly, I mean, I'm cool with. Here's the thing. We have the
Pokemon
subtitle
is a game
new.
that gets people back on the gameplay, right? Because the story is usually the same.
The stories are
Yep.
usually very basic. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the gameplay is what sells them. Yeah, and the monster collecting and the character design, basically. Yeah. So that's actually an
Yeah.
interesting case because you're not getting award-winning stories from Pokemon games. That's just
No, it's literally the same thing every day. I
The-
want to
the
be the very
most-
best that no one ever was.
the deepest story from what I
Train
recall,
them
from what
to
I've
my
heard.
road test.
Yeah.
Wait, no, I messed it up.
Good job.
Continue. Move on. Move on. Move
So
on.
the best story in the series I've heard was the Black and White and Black and White version 2 games. They had the deepest, most thought-provoking stories.
Although
most mature stories.
that also brought up the case of ludonarrative dissonance because it's like Ed's
Mm-hmm.
talking about like, oh, why do you fight? Maybe the Pokemon don't want to fight, and meanwhile he fights you with Pokemon,
Yeah,
and you don't have a choice to not fight.
true.
But they did some interesting things with what they could do within that formula.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for instance, every time N fights you, he has a completely new party
Yep.
because it seems like he kind of just gets a a group of Pokemon that like
Are
are
willing
willing
to
to
help
help him, and then they go on their way after his fight with you.
Mm-hmm. Which, yeah, it is unique, and I've heard basically, like, at the time that the Black and White games came out, people didn't like them because of how they kind of like replaced all the legacy Pokemon with new ones, and people didn't like that because, you know, how people react to change, right, in long-running series. But nowadays people look back at it and they're like, it was one of the best Pokemon games ever in retrospect. And so because the story was so good, and because it actually had some challenge to it, some difficulty, and, you know, and then so it's just one of those cases where actually the story elevated it in the fan base above the rest.
Interesting.
Yeah,
I have no opinion on that.
yeah, it's just something I wanted to mention since I brought up Pokemon, a case where, and it does tie in, a case where the story elevated it to higher levels because it did something with its story that none of the others did, and told a bit more of a thought-provoking and mature story without being, you know, vulgar, of course, because it's Pokemon, but one that actually adults can actually think about, and it's not like well, not like the titles, it's not black and white. I think that was the whole reason they named it Black and White.
Yeah.
Right.
So
But also, like, if I'm not cutting anyone off, I do have like another angle to go at, because I have a little bit of research here. Because obviously, one of the things that that promoted story in video games, right, was the evolution of the technology and thus the cutscene, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what seems to be the first video game was actually called Tennis for Two in 1958. It was made by a physicist for an interactive exhibit for Brookhaven National Laboratory. So, but
that's what became Pong, huh?
I'm not sure if that became Pong, but it definitely seems to have given rise to Pong later. But that was the first video game. But then 23 years later was the first video game to have a narrative. Guess what it was?
I have no clue, dude.
Donkey Kong.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Donkey Kong had a narrative. It's a very simple one, but it played out in what you played.
True. And people remember it because you're climbing up to save Pauline, and they remember seeing Donkey Kong at the beginning, grab her and climb up, destroy the tower, and every time you get there, he grabs her and goes higher.
In like the Atari years, right? For a while before that, there was a lot of like sports-based video games that's just play a sport virtual.
Yeah.
You know?
Like golf, virtual golf.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The first cutscene in video games, though, was in 1981, right before Donkey Kong and Pac-Man's opening.
Huh.
That's what's considered the first cutscene. Now, granted, that's not what we think of as cutscenes today, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But so there was also developments like Snatcher by Konami in 1988. It's a more mature game. It's set in a future metropolis with human robots dubbed snatchers have been discovered killing humans and replacing them in society. And you play a main character who's an amnesiac in an anti-snatcher society agency in search of his past. And it's like open world. It's primarily gameplay is through a menu interface. You examine things and search things and such. So that had more cinematic in-game cutscenes. Then what came was, as we talked about earlier, Final Fantasy VII really bumped up the cinematic production quality of cutscenes. But the first real-time rendering cutscenes were, or at least some of the first ones were Tomb Raider, Metal Gear Solid 2. So yeah, real-time rendering cutscenes.
Graphics.
Because Final Fantasy VII had like pre-rendered cutscenes, right? And then the earliest examples of video games where cutscenes and gameplay seamlessly merged together are games like Silent Hill 2 in 2001, as well as Final Fantasy X, Onimusha 3 in 2004, and Resident Evil 4 in 2004.
Interesting. Yeah, and like cutscenes definitely aided in telling better stories. Actually,
because video games started as just gameplay, and technology advancing gave people more tools in order to, convey a story.
So as the technology evolved, the medium of games evolved, and one of those evolutions
As a
was to start telling
storytelling medium.
stories. Yeah. So storytelling is very important to the medium now, as part of its crucial, like, core evolution, basically. So it's definitely not to be understated. But as we said earlier too, story and gameplay should not be mutually exclusive, right? Because the best story but unengaging gameplay can make a person lose motivation to play. But then great
like,
gameplay and awful story can do the same.
Because like nowadays, video games are very unique, right? In the way that it can combine a game and a story. Because if you think of physical games in the real world, right? If you're playing basketball, you're not experiencing a story, you're just playing a game.
Yeah.
You know? So
it's like a simulation, if anything.
Yeah, so it started very, very much the same way as physical games, where it's simply entertainment. Yeah. But the advancement in technology sort of made it a marriage of game and, you know, story, sometimes in the way that you can experience them in, like, movies.
Yeah, and actually it's become the most profitable storytelling medium in the world. Video games are more successful than movies in terms of, like, as an industry.
But that's why I also would say, and this is kind of the point that I'm getting to, is games, you know, video games started as games, right? The entertainment is first and foremost, and that is mainly, or at first was through the gameplay. So that is going to be the most important thing generally, but when you can also do a very good story along with the gameplay, then that elevates it.
Yeah, actually, Sapphire, so since you're like the Final Fantasy expert here, I've known people who absolutely love Final Fantasy X. I have a friend who that's their favorite game, and that was the first one to have voice acting. It also had in-engine cutscenes and pre-rendered cutscenes, both.
Yep.
And it had turn-based gameplay, but had a unique spin on it, right?
Yes, and what was really cool about 10 is that you could swap out your characters whenever you want. So you had the capability within the same combat instance to swap out one character for another, and that really could vastly change, you know, the outcome, right? If you had a character with you that couldn't cast spells, but you had like an elemental that of a specific element, you could swap in your mage Lulu to be able to cast like an ice spell on a fire character or something like that. Or if you needed a healer, you could swap your healer in to heal everybody, and you didn't have to worry about, oh my god, I've got the wrong setup of people for this combat. You had the ability. It took a turn away, but it still gave you that ability to control things, again helping with the immersion, also allowing you to access all your characters at all times, which is something that a lot of RPGs with huge casts are able to do. You know, you get, for example, in most Final Fantasy games, or a lot of RPGs, turn-based RPGs in general, you get a cast of like 8 to 10 characters, or even 12. Going back to Trails of Cold Steel, because that's kind of like the most relevant thing to me right now, you literally get a cast of like 30 some odd people by the fourth game, because you're getting characters from all the other games coming in this kind of, because it's like a convergence. There's stuff from the previous games, and they're all coming in to converge on this particular instance at the end of the fourth game.
Wow, they did it on Avengers.
Sorry,
huh?
that's kind of spoilerish. Not really Avengers like, because they're not all together. They're just kind of things happening simultaneously, and then at some point you do get them all together or something like that. I haven't played it. I just watched my friend do it.
Right, and again, I remember popping in on one of the streams of 2, where the characters were talking about the main character of the last game.
It's the same main character.
Wait, what? Okay, yeah. I guess I did. All right, never mind. I will go in the corner with my shame.
No, it's okay. But my point is like, that allowed you to be able to have access to the entire cast whenever it is you wanted to, without having to worry about, okay, well, this character's under-leveled. That was a disadvantage I had with 7, where, because at the end of 7, it forces you to use multiple parties. You have to play one part of it with multiple parties, and if you don't, you're screwed. So that means the first time I played, I
Grind
didn't know that,
time.
and I was just playing my 3 characters that I liked,
Oh
right?
no.
And of course, I went in and I'm like, it gives you random characters.
So you got soft locked?
I got locked. Yeah, I had to go back and do stuff, and it was awful. So like
Wow.
the fact that all your characters get to level because they're there,
Mhm.
I think that was a more realistic approach
Yeah.
to the RPG itself, because even though the party isn't actually physically fighting, they're present. They should be able to experience the experience.
Yeah.
For lack of a better term.
They're not just standing around like a plank of wood, right?
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah, no, I
Exactly.
get that. And that's one
And,
thing I
like-
always thought was dumb in older RPGs, when you have like your party of 3 and you still have like 4 or 5 reserve characters that never get any use and they're just underleveled. And once the gap widens enough, you have no reason to go back and use them because now the enemies are too strong for them to actually survive the encounter and level up.
Grind.
Yeah.
And I don't,
like grinding.
I don't like the grind. Grinding is boring.
So that's something we all can agree on.
That's why autoplay is useful. See, I found a use for it.
So yeah.
I mean, could just design it to where that grinding isn't necessary, but
Yeah.
I'm saying that is definitely the way it should be. Is
Yeah.
that grinding should not be necessary. You
Yeah.
should be able to beat the game without having to grind out for levels. You
Because
know?
that puts the story on pause, right?
Yeah, exactly. My second
Unrealistically.
playthrough of 9, and it was on the PS1. It wasn't like a Steam version or anything like that. I literally power leveled my characters. I worked really hard and I got them all to 99, and I played the game through for a second time, and I literally 100%ed it because I wanted to.
Hmm. Well, I find it funny because, like, if those games that, especially the older turn-based RPGs that like didn't do very good at scaling the difficulty,
Mhm.
so like at a certain point when the enemy encounters are just too high level for you, then it's like, okay, I know that the world's in danger or the kingdom's in danger, but we have to go over there and kill 500 lizards just so that we can take on the enemies in the next area. Like, it just takes you out of the story,
Mhm.
It's
Well,
like,
you can't
pause.
just run. We can't run from one place to another and get through the story, because exactly that.
And that happened to me actually when I was playing Final Fantasy 3, the 3D remake on DS,
Mhm.
where they had the
Was it-
chibi 3D models.
is that the one
3
that
or
got
4?
stuck
No,
in?
I think that was 4.
They did it for 3 first, where you had
Okay.
the 4 Warriors of Light that you could name, and had the job system. That was the one with the job system.
Okay.
Yeah, that was on DS first, and then they used that same graphical engine to remake 4 on DS. But then in 4 they also added voice acting in certain key scenes. I think.
'Cause
But
I
yeah.
remember getting stuck in one of those Final Fantasy games where there's a point where you have to use mini on yourself to go through like a rat hole or whatever, and all of your physical attacks just do 1 damage because you're tiny.
Mhm.
But then I ran out of like MP to be able to unmini myself, and I couldn't get out to go back to somewhere else where I could level.
Yeah, and then when fighting the rats, then they're like giants to you, basically.
Yeah, I got soft locked,
Yeah,
basically.
because there was no scaling difficulty, and if you're in a bad situation, or for me, when I was in 3, I got to the final boss, the Cloud of Darkness, and my party was too underleveled to beat it, just outright. And then I had to grind to be able to it, and during the process of grinding, I burnt out and put the game down and never touched it again.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's the case. Like I said, the story and the gameplay, they're at this point, they're kind of married together in this medium, right? And one can detract from the other.
Right. Like it should be there, but it shouldn't distract you.
Yeah.
I mean,
But then,
games still can survive nowadays on mainly the gameplay, but usually there is at least a like bare bones story that's thrown in there, like for instance in a lot of beat 'em ups, right? Like
Yeah.
especially retro style beat 'em ups done today, like River City Girls or whatever. There's a premise that's thrown at you, kind of like Donkey Kong. It's like, okay, this is the thing that you're gonna do, and then you go and you play the game. But
Yeah.
it's not a narrative, really. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not a story-based game.
Mhm.
You just have a goal.
No, that makes sense. But that goal, so basically with story, whether it's a basic goal, premise, setup, or a full-on narrative, it, when used right, motivates players to continue playing.
Yeah.
Because like I know that I've seen some reviews of games and like older, like especially PlayStation 2 games, like your Metal Gears and stuff. But I think the game was The Bouncer.
Metal Gear.
If you're familiar with that one from Square Enix and Tetsuya Nomura from Kingdom Hearts. It's essentially a beat 'em up, but a 3D beat 'em up, but with hardly any mechanics. Like it's so bare bones, and then the cutscenes. So you get like 4-minute cutscenes for 2 minutes of gameplay, or 7-minute cutscene for 2.5 minutes of gameplay, or 45 seconds of gameplay. And that's a situation where they were trying to tell this grand story, but then the cutscenes overstay their welcome because they're so long, like your Metal Gear Solid 4, right, where you have like 15-minute cutscenes because Kojima wanted to make a movie, not a game.
That reminds me of like Blaze Blue story mode, where it's just like, am I just watching a movie? I want to do fights, please.
Yeah, so you can go to the extreme on either end, really, and it does detract from the experience. So, like many things that we talk about on this thing, balance is the key, right? That seems to be just a common thread in our topics.
Definitely.
It's like, we're like the anti-radicalization of topics, basically. We bring in varied perspectives, and we always come to a you need balance conclusion.
I mean, I think in the case of story in video games, though, it also just depends on the kind of game that you're making. Like when I mentioned the retro beat 'em ups, right? You don't need that much of a story, but a game like Last of Us wouldn't have been able to survive if it wasn't like based around the writing, the narrative. Yeah. Because from what I know about the gameplay, it's not anything special, really. True. It's just a polished shooter.
Third-person shooter.
Adventure third-person shooter.
So I just had a thought that just popped in my head too. And I know, Sapphire, you might have some thoughts on this, actually. Visual novels. All story, no gameplay.
I forgot I was going to mention that.
I love visual novels, actually.
Yeah, and those are all story, no gameplay, pretty much, other than like decision points in the dialogue.
It's all decision making.
Yeah.
I find those interesting.
Yeah. So what would you say is the draw for that? The biggest draw? Because I played a couple, but like it's not a genre that's for me. I know that. So
but you might like Arcade Spirits because it actually has like a combat system to it. It's a simple rock paper scissors combat, but it's kind of interesting that they put that in there
to simulate the esports.
Yeah, that was a great game. I really liked Arcade Spirits. It was a good take on the the visual novel plus a little bit of gameplay. But like your decisions matter. Like you have several romance options. You could choose to romance nobody. You can also choose like your other people to romance, like each other, that kind of thing.
So and what is you know what? Now that I think about it, I've seen some other visual novels that had gameplay. I saw one that was a visual novel. It was like, I think it was sci-fi, and it had like mechs, and it was a visual novel. It was basically, actually, now I think about it, Fire Emblem. Three Houses essentially was kind of like a visual novel with strategy RPG elements, and I've seen some visual novels that are like that too in the indie space. Mm-hmm. So
Arcade Spirits is an indie game.
Yeah, so kind of switching the phases, right? Switching modes. Basically, you have your story, narrative focused mode with dialogue, and then you have your gameplay focused mode. Yeah. But how about visual novels that don't have elements like that? You've enjoyed ones like that before, right? And so
right, the experience is making the choices and seeing how the story progresses based on your choices.
Okay, so like I mentioned earlier in this discussion, then it's the player agency. Like Sai said, the agency is that being able to influence the direction the story goes that keeps you engaged.
Right, and it's like those books where you like it's like after you make this decision, go to page this.
Choose your own adventure.
That's what it feels like. Choose your own adventure.
Yeah.
That's what it feels like.
Okay.
I love those.
Yeah. No, I get that. And I actually had a few as a kid. I had a Star Wars one, now I think about it. I might still have it on my bookshelf, actually.
Yeah, I have a Zelda one that I still have.
Oh, nice. So yeah, okay. So yeah, I see that. So in a way, it kind of does feel like a measure of gameplay, not unlike tabletop RPGs, huh? Where
right, exactly. Where it's like you literally are just choosing your own adventure.
Okay. Oh, yeah, so it
even
still
though you're
has-
not, so even though you're not like physically in combat, you're like choosing to either combat that thing or run away or
Mhm.
thing or whatever it is that you decide to do.
Yeah.
It still like has effect on your story.
Okay, yeah. So it's still, in a way, they do kind of implement a form of gameplay, just not what most would think of for gameplay. It's not real time or even turn-based combat system.
Yeah.
I've seen some visual novels that literally have no decisions to be made. You're literally just watching a book, basically. And I'm like, what's the point?
It's just a book on tape.
Yeah, I'm like, what's the
Yeah.
point?
But they have to call it a visual novel because that's what it is. It's a visual
But
novel.
then it doesn't have
Just
voice. But then they
publish
don't
a
have voice
book.
acting. Yeah, but then they don't have voice acting, so it's not
Oh,
even
wait,
as.
but then they can't have the pictures.
Yeah, but then it's like, but with these cases, it's like there's not even voice acting in most of them, so it's like not even an audiobook, you know?
I don't know. I think you could like liken that to those otome games where really you have two decisions: you pay or you don't pay.
I guess so.
Like you have the decision where you pay for the choice, or you have the decision where you don't pay for the choice.
Uh-huh.
And usually the paid choice is the better choice, obviously, because it's the nicer of the story.
Mhm.
Yeah, that is
Oh.
that is.
Okay.
I mean it's the same type of thing. It's a visual novel
Yeah.
where like it's literally you have one or two or three choices to
At
make.
least
Or
you're
two or
making
three-
choices.
Two or three dialogue options, but there's no combat to it.
Yeah, but at least you're making choices, and as we've kind of come to on the conclusion on that is in and of itself a form of gameplay,
Yeah.
interaction with the story, with the
Yeah.
medium. You're not just sitting there reading text that's scrolling in a linear story that you have absolutely no input on, other than pressing A to progress the dialogue, progress the text,
Or
Yeah.
turning on the
I've-
auto.
or turning
I've
on the auto
never-
text.
I've never played a game like that, I'll be honest.
But they exist. I've seen them on Steam, and I'm
Yeah.
like, what's the point? So I guess that just goes to show that if there's not some form of gameplay, whether it be as simple as decision making in dialogue choices, then the medium of video games just kind of, it doesn't feel like a game anymore, right? It feels like
Mhm.
a book.
Mhm.
And at that point, you go read a book or listen to an audiobook, right?
Yeah, so even for someone who the story comes first generally for video games, there is still a necessity for gameplay.
Oh,
Yep.
yeah.
That's
would
what
say
makes
so.
it a game. So,
Yeah.
But still, you can't just completely ignore story or premise unless, well, you can, depending on the type of game, right?
I think it's interesting to hear that from you though, because like from one of us, that sort of conclusion would be like, oh yeah, obviously they're saying that, but you know, to hear that from someone whose focus is the story is a bit more telling, I think.
Yeah. No, and that's why I felt that Sapphire was a great person to have as a guest for this topic. Just bringing a perspective that does differ from ours, but has enough similarities. You know, we can still relate on some of the experiences, but, you know, like the subtitle of the show is New Perspectives, right? We don't want an echo chamber here. We don't want it to just be me and Sai all the time. We want to try and bring some balance into the discussion and
To the force.
balance to the force. And
I had to.
yeah, but you know, bring some nuance to it. That way it can be a balanced discussion is what I should probably say. Instead of being an echo chamber and just, this is what I think and therefore it is right and therefore you should agree with me. So, because like, you know, you and I, we don't necessarily agree on Genshin, right? But we
Yeah.
respect each other's thoughts on it.
Yeah.
And that's
I'm not
what,
too worried.
yeah, and that's what creates good discussion. So
I've never even tried the game. I've
Yes.
never wanted to.
he's a neutral third party. But yeah.
I wouldn't say neutral.
Okay, well, you're a
Just
you're a
don't wanna
non
try it.
you're a
I'm
non
a curmudgeon, okay.
a non-engager then.
I'm a curmudgeon, you know this.
Yeah, between us, even though I'm the older brother, you can be more of an old man sometimes.
That happens.
But yeah.
That just found me.
Yeah, so I think we pretty much said that all that can really be said from the three of us on this this topic, I think.
Yeah, we got a lot of good stuff out of it.
Yeah, we did. I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much for
Got all the
coming.
juice out of the conversation.
It was a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, and hopefully we can have you again sometime in the future when it's a topic that you have a lot of thoughts about or a lot of experience in. So
Just don't bring me for Pokemon. Trust me, you don't want to hear my opinion on Pokemon.
I might try to wrangle you into a one-on-one discussion about that on YouTube.
Okay, I'm okay with that. I just don't want someone to be like, no, you're wrong.
No. Hey, see, that's the thing. We would never do that, though. It's. I like hearing multiple takes and hot takes sometimes on things like that. I have my own strong thoughts on newer Pokemon games too, and like the fighting game genre as a whole in recent years. And you know, I'm no stranger to saying some hot takes and ruffling some feathers with them. So I welcome it.
Okay.
Yeah, you're not going to get attacked for that here, and I won't let anyone attack guest for that or anything like that. It's just keep it, you know. Okay, this is going to be for the listeners and the viewers. Okay, so on YouTube comments, keep it. If you agreed with anything we said, or if you disagree, just keep it civil. No arguments. No, don't be cruel or mean with the way you say it. Just have civil discussion. We like disagreements when they're civil. You know, it's how you can enlighten your perspectives and learn new things about the way people other than yourself view things and see things. So
True.
So keep that energy going. That's what we do here. Keep that going in the comments and all that. So Sapphire, where can the listeners find you?
All my socials are the same. So Arixphes, ARIXPHES. So pretty much on Twitch, YouTube, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram. I don't really use my Instagram, but it's there. So if you ever want to find me, that's where you'll find me. I'm most active on Discord as well. So you can access my Discord through my Twitter very easily. We have a very kind of active community that talks mostly Genshin, fighting games, and just regular mental health stuff, because I deal with a lot of mental health issues. It's been a very supportive community, which is really nice to have, even for myself when I have those days. So if ever you're looking for that is your place to go.
Yeah, and one of the reasons I respect you too is your very upbuilding kind of energy and the way you try to cultivate your community to be more upbuilding and very strong camaraderie, you know. And then you're also family friendly. You keep it clean on your streams. You know, encourage your audience and your community to keep it clean as well, which is a rare thing nowadays. So definitely just reasons why I definitely respect you as a content creator and as a person, and have stuck around, you know, in your streams and playing games with you occasionally for those kind of reasons and stuff. It's just the quality of character. So
Appreciate that.
I definitely encourage you to check her out. She's got good stuff, especially if you enjoy, you know, narrative heavy games, RPGs, and she does most weeks fighting game sessions and stuff too. So
Yeah, just it hasn't been for the last few weeks because Grand Blue's been kind of dead, but Street Fighter was great.
yeah,
Street
once
Fighter was
once
great.
Grand Blue versus Rising comes out, that'll reinvigorate that for sure.
I think so. Yeah, I'm excited for that.
It's going to have rollback
Yeah.
and crossplay, so it's going to reinvigorate it. And even if it doesn't bring big numbers, that crossplay and rollback means you'll have no trouble finding good matches. So
I'm waiting for that to rampage onto the stream with Vasaragi. Better get ready.
I'm scared.
He's step stomping, man.
he does. He steps.
Yeah.
All right, and then so Sai, I know that you like you always say, I'm not that active right now.
Nothing.
But yes, that's what you always say. I do nothing. But you've got stuff coming down the pipeline. So
Listen, the pipe might get clogged, okay? So don't get your hopes up. But I'm trying to work on stuff.
okay, well, check him out at Sai Prime on everything. SAIPRIME. I'll put
so
in the
far
plug.
I'm really just on like Twitch. I don't really have streams going, but maybe at some point
Yeah,
again.
Twitch and
I'm
Twitter,
also on
and then
Twitter
YouTube soon.
At some point.
I'll help you get it all set up, your YouTube channel. That way you're good.
I'm an old man, okay? I'm not a computer man. I know how to do the things that I do right now.
Even though you're younger than me, you're the old man. Okay, like I said.
Open office. I open it up and I type and I do a paper. It's that.
Okay, dude.
I like to push buttons.
I click on the game and the game comes up and I get my controller. I press the buttons and I'm happy.
Okay. And then, and I don't have to plug my stuff because you're already on my channel. But yeah, so I will plug the Twitter though, because for the podcast listeners, if you have any thoughts, feedback or comments on what we said here, then you can just tweet at s_factor_sam or use the hashtag CounterPickPod all together as one word.
Yeah, we shouldn't have to tell you what the channel is because you're already here. If you don't know where you are, how did you make it this far?
Who's confused?
Yeah. I'm sorry, I'm in a mood right now.
Paradox, huh?
Yep.
If you're listening to this and you don't know where you are, hi. I hope you're doing okay, and maybe you should go see a doctor about that.
I know, but they already did come see a doctor. What do you think you are?
Hey.
Oh god. Okay. So yeah,
We'll be here all week.
all links will be in the show notes and description as well for all three of us. So
We have show notes?
on the podcast, it has show notes. That's what you call the description. And then on YouTube, it's called the description.
Oh.
The more you know.
I've been let down. It sounded more important than the description.
Well, because okay. Well, anyway, I know the terminology. Okay,
I don't know why.
I'm Dr. Sam for a reason. I know the terminology. Okay, I'm gonna use the proper terminology. Dang it!
All right.
I was more talking to Sai there. He can be a little. We do a little trolling occasionally. Anyway, so yeah. That's it for us. All right, so we're gonna sign off here. Thank you for listening. Thank you so much again, Sapphire, for joining us in this discussion.
It was my pleasure.
All right, and we'll see you next month for our next topic. Don't know what it's gonna be. We'll decide on the way to that. And I'll see if I can get another guest member. Can't promise it's gonna happen, but who knows? All right, we're out of here. Have a great one. And until we see you next time, go and learn something.
that was an aggressive.
You know what? I'm still workshopping the catchphrase, okay? All right.
Just
Have a good one, everyone.
Outro.
Yeah, outro.
Outro.
See ya.
Bye.
We're so bad at outros. Okay. We always have been, but that's been a running gag. We're done now. We're actually done.
Okay.
I thought we already cut.